here's how it starts, and I will tell you, it goes by fast. From the moment they entered the courtroom to the moment they all filed out, the whole thing took less than 5 minutes. But here's how it starts in the transcript. The jury enters at 2:21 p.m. The judge, all right, please be seated. Will the foreperson please stand and be identified? I understand you've reached a verdict, is that correct? The foreperson, yes, sir, we have. The judge, is it unanimous? The foreperson, yes, sir. The judge, have you completed the verdict form? The foreperson, yes. The judge, would you give it to Mr. Burns, please? The court clerk. The verdict form is given to the court clerk. The judge, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to read your verdict. Please listen carefully to the verdict as it's read, because once the verdict is read, each of you will be asked whether this is, in fact, your verdict. And then the court clerk says, will the defendant please rise and face the jury? The defendant rises and faces the jury, and then the clerk reads from the verdict form. We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Bijan Keyon, guilty of conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of a foreign government, as charged in Count 1A of the indictment. We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Bijan Kian, guilty of conspiracy to make willful and material false statements and omissions in a Foreign Agent Registration Act filing, as charged in Count 1B of the indictment. And we, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Bijan Keyon, guilty of acting in the United States as an unregistered agent of a foreign government, as charged in Count 2 of the indictment. So say we all, this 23rd day of July, 2019, signed by the foreperson. Now, the judge says, please poll the jury. The transcript notes, each juror, upon being asked by the clerk, is this your true verdict? Answered in the affirmative. The judge then says to the jury, thank you. The defendant may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your service has now ended. You are excused with the thanks of the court. And the jury exits at 2:25 p.m., which means the whole thing took 4 minutes. And that was it. Guilty on all counts. And it had to happen today of all days, right? I mean, even if tomorrow wasn't going to be Robert Mueller's testimony in Congress, there's already a lot going on, right? I mean, today, for example, just tonight, we just got a new Secretary of Defense. Another lobbyist. So now there's a lobbyist for coal companies running the EPA, a lobbyist for oil companies running the Interior Department, a guy who ran the lobbying efforts for big pharmaceutical firms running Health and Human Services, and now we've got a lobbyist for Raytheon, one of the biggest defense contractors on earth, running the Defense Department. Perhaps you are noticing a theme here. The president literally gave, in his big re-election kickoff rally, literally gave this speech about how he was destroying the unholy alliance of lobbyists and special interests who were bleeding our country dry. We've now got lobbyists running each of their respective agencies in the cabinet, including the Pentagon. Today, also, our closest overseas ally, the United Kingdom, went through its own iteration of our 2016 presidential election when the tragicomic, bumbling, Trump-like pro-Brexit character Boris Johnson became, believe it or not, Prime Minister. Yeah, him. Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, actually. And the United Kingdom will now face stronger pressure than ever before to, among other things, break itself up into bits as a result of Boris Johnson ascending to this job, because Boris Johnson is hell-bent on breaking the UK out of the European Union, no matter what it takes. But the UK's constituent parts, including Scotland and Northern Ireland and to some extent Wales, they do not want to get out of the European Union. And with Boris Johnson now becoming prime minister, pro-independence leaders in all of those constituent parts of the UK are now starting to loudly insist that if Boris Johnson really does insist on a hard Brexit, if he really does try to force this, if he really tries to follow through on what he says about breaking the UK out of the European Union, well, those other parts of the UK might instead break themselves off from Boris and his Brexit plans so that they can stay European countries, because they all want to stay in the European Union. That happened today. Also today, after some of the biggest protests in the history of Puerto Rico yesterday, tonight, the governor in Puerto Rico still has not resigned, although we have learned as of tonight that the Puerto Rican governor has apparently been confronted with a law enforcement warrant to search his electronics. And tonight, the chief of staff to Republican Governor Ricardo Rosselló has resigned. His chief of staff has resigned as of tonight. So that means that we are on a resignation watch for that Republican governor as of right now and into the overnight hours. It is hard to see how he stays on in that job. And on top of that, not for nothing, I should tell you that tonight a whole bunch of people have superglued themselves to the U.S. Capitol. They have superglued themselves to the door jambs and the hallways and the doors that connect the U.S. House office building to the U.S. Capitol building. These protesters are proclaiming a climate emergency. They want Congress to declare a climate emergency. We have all seen lots of people chain themselves to things. In this case, they have glued themselves. They have glued their skin to the doors and hallways connecting the U.S. House office building to the U.S. Capitol. That is ongoing. So, I mean, today has already been kind of a momentous day all around. But on the eve of Robert Mueller's testimony to the House of Representatives starting early tomorrow morning, it is pretty remarkable that Robert Mueller's team today, this afternoon, got themselves another landmark victory in court. I mean, there have been dozens of indictments. There have been many guilty pleas. There have been many cooperation deals that have sprung from Mueller's investigation into Russia intervening in our election to help put Donald Trump into the White House. But for all of those dozens of indictments, Mueller's investigation has only led to 2 trials before a jury. The first one, of course, put President Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, in prison for at least 7 years. That's his federal prison sentence, and that is separate and apart from any time he may get if he's convicted on the state charges he's also now facing at the same time. So Manafort was only the first jury trial that came out of Mueller's investigation. Only the second jury trial that has come out of Mueller's investigation ended in dramatic fashion today, this afternoon, with that jury walking into that courtroom in the Eastern District of Virginia at 2:21 p.m. Eastern Time to announce their unanimous decision to issue guilty verdicts on all counts against Bijan Kian, who was a Trump transition official. He was the number 2 official in the Trump transition working on intelligence issues. Now, Keyon initially came under investigation as part of Mueller's probe. Mueller's team then handed off the Bijan Keyon case to other federal prosecutors, these prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia. They ultimately brought charges against Keyon for him acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign power at the time he was working as a Trump transition official. As the number 2 person in the Trump transition on intelligence matters, Mr. Keyon reportedly participated in key hiring decisions for the new administration. Things like who would run the nation's intelligence agencies under President Donald Trump. Bijan Keyon was taking part in those decisions while he was secretly on the payroll of a foreign country, as determined today by a federal jury. And I mean, that alone should be kind of a showstopper, right? For this or any presidency. You played a role in picking the CIA director while you were being paid by another country secretly? That's weird, right? I mean, you'd think that would be kind of a... But, you know, this Keyon case is one of a lot of things going on with this administration, and it alone has been overshadowed a little bit, even from the outset, by what it has told us over time about somebody else in Trump's orbit, about Bijan Kion's business partner and his fellow Trump transition official, the Trump campaign aide Michael Flynn, who would go on to be named National Security Advisor by President Trump. And the Flynn stuff that came out in the Keyon case still is slightly mind-boggling. And prosecutors, for example, laid out in court in the Keyon case part of what Mike Flynn's day was like on the fateful day of October 7th, 2016, during the campaign. Basically exactly a month before the actual election. You remember that date, October 7th, 2016, if you remember any other date from the campaign, because that is the single day when, in quick succession, the U.S. government announced officially that Russia was interfering in the election. That was that joint statement from the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence. The U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government is interfering. Shortly thereafter, the Access Hollywood tape came out, which threatened to end Trump's presidential campaign 1 month before the election, because that was the tape in which he was heard bragging about what he could do to women, what he could grab them by, and when you are a star, they let you do it. Shortly thereafter, very shortly thereafter, that same day, is when WikiLeaks started releasing the emails that Russian intelligence had hacked from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman and then provided to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks to distribute to try to cause maximum harm to Hillary Clinton's campaign and to boost Donald Trump as best they could. All of those things all happened on the same day, on October 7th. And in the Keyon trial this past week, we learned that on that same day, on October 7th, Mike Flynn was fielding phone calls from his foreign paymaster, from the Turkish guy who was paying him over $500,000 during the campaign to essentially act as a foreign agent representing the interest of a foreign government without declaring himself as such in the U.S. while he worked on a U.S. presidential campaign. On that day, on October 7th, the Turkish guy who was paying Mike Flynn apparently got on the phone with Flynn and reamed him out about how Turkey was basically not getting its money's worth from the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. That day, October 7th, Michael Flynn's Turkish paymaster got on the phone with Flynn, demanding to know why Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump was not saying nicer things about Turkey, why he was not attacking the enemies of the president of Turkey. After all, wasn't Flynn being paid for just that? Was Turkey getting its money's worth out of this guy they secretly had on their payroll who was working on the Trump campaign? I mean, that is the kind of call that Mike Flynn was having to take on Access Hollywood Day, right? Get on it, Mike. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. We do kind of have a few other things on our plate today, sir, but I will try to get you your money's worth. Foreign country paying me secretly while I work on this campaign. I mean, we still don't know how this is all going to shake out for Flynn. Even now that his business partner, this other guy from the Trump transition, Bijan Kian, has been convicted on all counts today. But it is worth pausing, even just for a moment, I think, even amidst everything else going on right now, to appreciate, just savor this for a second. That the president of the United States, his top campaign foreign policy advisor, was literally on the payroll of a foreign country, being paid to influence the future president. And then, even after that was notified to the presidential transition, and the Trump administration, incoming Trump administration, the Trump transition knew it, that Flynn had been on a foreign government's payroll. Nevertheless, the president picked that guy to be his top national security official. I mean, I know this will probably be a tiny footnote in the history of even just this insane year of this insane presidency. But honestly, that deserves its own full chapter. That would be the kind of thing that would, like, destroy a whole other presidency. But in this one, it's like, oh, yeah, that happened. Right. And you might remember, in Mike Flynn's own case, he recently traded in his sort of normal lawyers for instead a new lawyer. He instead retained a new sort of Fox News regular who literally sells anti-Robert Mueller T-shirts on her website. That's Mike Flynn's new lawyer. Flynn is still awaiting sentencing for his own crimes. He has pled guilty to lying to investigators. He admitted in his plea deal to lying in his federal filings, in which he insisted that, of course, he wasn't a paid foreign agent. But since he has switched his legal team, as best as we can tell, the strategic advice Flynn seems to have received from his new Fox News lawyer was that he should try to blow up the federal criminal case that prosecutors were pursuing against Bijan Keyon, against Flynn's former business partner. Flynn had been due to be the star witness against Keyon. He was expected to testify for the prosecution in Keyon's trial. He was expected to testify about all the work that he and Keyon did for Flynn's consulting firm on behalf of this foreign government. That all got upended when Flynn got his new lawyers, who apparently told him it would be fine for him, it would be a good idea for him to change his mind about what he had previously admitted to prosecutors. They apparently advised him that he should just go ahead and change his story now. I think the idea must have been that if these prosecutors lost Flynn as their star witness against Keyon, the whole case against Keyon would collapse. Keyon would be acquitted, or the charges would be dropped, and that would be a terrible big black eye for the prosecutors and for Robert Mueller in particular. I mean, perhaps when you have an anti-Robert Mueller crusading TV lawyer representing you, that seems like a surefire strategy to grease your own skids and get yourself off the hook. blow up Mueller's prosecution of this other guy. That'll make Mueller look bad. And then the whole deep state charade of the Mueller investigation will come crashing down and all the charges will be dropped against Mike Flynn, or at least he'll get a light sentence, and everybody will get a Fox News contributor contract and we'll all laugh all the way to the bank. I mean, I guess that's how they thought it was going to go. Today, that strategy took a little bit of a hit when prosecutors actually won their case against Keyon and got conviction of him on all counts, even without Mike Flynn as a witness. And now, in the wake of that unanimous jury verdict that he is guilty on all counts, now Mike Flynn, President Trump's national security advisor, is in the unenviable position of having his business partner convicted for something Flynn already admitted to prosecutors that he himself did. And in a failed effort to prevent that conviction from happening, Flynn has just blown up his own position as a cooperating witness for prosecutors, which was his best bet for avoiding a prison sentence for himself. And now his business partner is looking at a potential 15 years in prison, and Flynn still has his own sentencing in his own case ahead of him, which, again, will hinge on just how valuable he has been to prosecutors all this time. The same prosecutors he just double-crossed and changed his story on and tried to kill their case against his business partner, and he failed in that effort. Oops. Good luck at your sentencing. I mean, it's weird. It's like the whole anti-Robert Mueller T-shirt arguments don't work as well outside of Fox News.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.